Hi everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And it seems these days like you can't swing a diaper bag over your head without hitting an SUV or a crossover. And that's why so many car companies are offering up a slew of choices for each and every specific need. Well, not to be outdone here, Mitsubishi is shoehorning another option into its lineup for you. We've had the larger sized Outlander for a while, the RVR was brought into the mix for people who want a subcompact, and now, new for 2018, the Eclipse Cross is entering the fold. Now, if the Mitsubishi Eclipse name rings a distant bell for you, you're not mistaken here, because the company offered a sporty coupe by the same name until 2012. And the name is meant to be a bit of a nod to the spirit of design, the driving dynamics, and the technology that we saw in that car. So does the new Eclipse Cross rise to the occasion? Well, stick around to find out this week here on Family Wheels. Well, much like the Outlander, the Eclipse Cross is doing something smart. They're designing this car to be a bit of a bridge between different size classes. So while it's officially considered a compact alongside the likes of the Forester or the CR-V or the Escape or the CX-5, it's a bit smaller, skewing toward the subcompact segment, but just a little more usable for extra space. It's targeted at urban millennials, so it's meant to be nimble, fun to drive, and kind of edgy in its design. And I like the way it looks from the front end, but go to the back end and that split window really isn't doing it for me. It's a little Pontiac Aztec-ish, which is not a good thing. Now, there are 4 trims to consider with the Eclipse crossover, and the starting price comes in at $27,798 Canadian before tax, with standard equipment including 18-inch alloy wheels, heated front seats, automatic climate control, and a 7-inch infotainment system screen with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Now, Mitsubishi said to me that one of the real selling features in this car was its standard features, but I'm not really seeing that here compared to the competition. This GT trim that I'm driving is the 3rd level up, the best seller in the lineup, and just a couple bucks shy of 36 grand. It certainly piles on plenty more. You've got adaptive cruise, forward collision mitigation braking, blind spot monitoring, leather seats, heated rear seats, a heated steering wheel, LED headlights, a split panel sunroof, and a heads-up display. But honestly, some of that stuff is coming on base trims on the competition these days. One thing that does separate the Eclipse Cross from pretty well all of its competitors, with the exception of the Subaru Forester though, is that all-wheel drive comes standard. And Mitsubishi has a very well-respected system called Super All-Wheel Control, a system that constantly monitors how the car is sitting in a corner through yaw control, kind of like the gyros in your cell phone that sense whether you're looking at the screen vertically or horizontally. Meanwhile, the Eclipse Cross also automatically integrates the braking system between left and right wheels to give you the very best control during tough driving scenarios. And even though this is a more city-minded car, it still has some impressive ground clearance, 215 millimeters for those days when a blizzard blows through or if you want to trek down an old logging road. But unfortunately, that extra ground clearance translates to a bit of body roll. Any quick movements in the wheel, particularly at highway speed, reveals some swaying that I really wasn't expecting. Meanwhile, all Eclipse Cross trims share the same powertrain. It's a turbocharged 1.5-liter 4-cylinder, which puts out 152 horsepower through a continuously variable transmission. Now, back when the new CR-V was released last year, I had a chance to drive the 1.5-liter turbo that's in that car, and I was a little leery about the size of the engine driving around a vehicle that big. But honestly, it was a pleasant surprise. Plenty of pep and an average fuel economy after a week of driving of 8.2 liters per 100 kilometers. That's really impressive. Unfortunately, despite the CR-V being larger and pumping out more power, what we saw in that car just doesn't play out here in the Eclipse Cross. While turbo lag isn't that bad for off-the-line performance, the engine does feel a bit underpowered when you are going to pass somebody on the highway or if you're going up a big hill. Its transmission also surges and motorboats along like CVTs that we saw from 2 generations ago in its competition, and for a car of this size, its fuel economy is not not that impressive either. Mitsubishi suggests 9.3 liters per 100 kilometers during combined driving, which is exactly what we've seen here on a mix of highway and city roads this week. So what we're left with then here is a crossover that's on the smaller side, yet still thirstier than many of its competitors. It's also lagging behind on standard equipment, despite being on the higher end in terms of pricing. So let's get to how the smaller size in this car affects our interior space. Front row comfort is actually pretty good, with plenty of headroom for a taller driver like me. Roger has a moderate amount of legroom in the second row in his front-facing car seat, but adults will struggle with legroom back there, especially if taller people are sitting up front. And at 6'2", I was squished in for headroom as well. That low roof line also made it irritating for loading Roger into his car seat, as I was always bumping my head trying to buckle him in. Now you flip that car seat around into rear-facing mode, and we're looking at a cramped 26 inches from the back of the front passenger seat up to the glove box. The trunk is also really small, especially in the top trims because of a big subwoofer that's been put back there as part of the Rockford Fosgate sound system. And that means that as tested here, we're having a hard time jamming in our standardized trunk test. Unfortunately, the stroller can't fit lengthwise, so it had to get flipped around widthwise, which gobbles up a big portion of the space on hand. It also wouldn't be a very kind space for a larger dog to spend any time. And if you want more space, the second row seats don't fold completely flat either, and there's no center pass-through for longer items like skis. Meanwhile, a power lift tailgate isn't an option at all, even on higher level trims. Neither are ventilated seats or a wireless charging station for your phone. The interior fit and finish is also lagging behind. We have a lot of cheaper plastics and switchware in here. These heated seat switches look like they were pulled from a car in the late 90s, and the heads-up display on the higher trims is old tech. It's projected onto a piece of plastic rather than the windshield itself. Meanwhile, the infotainment system interface is not particularly intuitive. It's controlled through a tricky-to-use trackpad, which, by the way, doesn't work when Android Auto is activated. The good news there is that the infotainment system is also a touch screen, so you can use that with your Android. The bad news is there's no volume knob like we saw in Hondas a few years ago, but they learned their lesson and put the volume knob back in. We have a touch screen control for the volume, and it's a bit of a pain because it's quite a reach to get to from the driver's position. And this dual sunroof that we have here on our tester is also a bit of a blast from the past. I admit, I was impressed when I saw these back in like 1999 when Subaru was putting them into their vehicles, but these days, a full-pane panorama sunroof has really become the norm. I'll be honest here, I really wanted to like the new Eclipse Cross. I was hoping that it would be a big step up for the company in what is a hyper-competitive crossover segment, but it's just not. Granted, it does have a famously good all-wheel drive system and a warranty that is impossible to touch. 10-year, 160,000 kilometer on the powertrain. That is nuts. But in so many ways, it all feels like a step back in time. And given that its starting price is actually more expensive than another famously capable little utility from Japan, the Subaru Forester, which also has an amazing all-wheel drive system as standard and some pretty impressive standard kit, I'm having a hard time seeing how the Eclipse will bring this company into the mainstream spotlight. Now, next time I see you, we're going to be in a very fuel-efficient minivan. It's the new Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid. That's in a week from now, right here on Family Wheels.